Hello everyone, my name is Todd from Healthy History, and I hope you enjoy 10 facts about US presidents that you never knew. I work really hard on these, and I don't use any AI, so please enjoy. Lyndon Baines Johnson reportedly called his private part Jumbo. He used to have Jumbo out in the bathroom while discussing policy and foreign affairs with cabinet officials. There was also a famous instance where President Johnson reportedly pulled out Jumbo during a press conference when asked why the US was involved in the Vietnam War, exclaiming, "This is why." There's also a famous phone call available of President Johnson calling a tailor to order some pants, where he uses quite crude language and even belches loudly into the phone.
Let's see if you can't leave me about an inch from where the zipper ends. Another thing, the crotch down where your nuts hang is always a little too tight. So when you make them up, give me an inch that I can let out there, because they cut me. They're just like riding a wire fence.
It is also reported President Johnson had a phone line next to one of his toilets so he could speak to officials while sitting on the porcelain throne. John Quincy Adams was an avid skinny dipper. The sixth president was known to take a nude dip in either the Potomac River or the Tiber Creek. When the president did this, he would wake around 4 in the morning to go out and do so. There is a famous legend of a woman reporter finding the president swimming in the Potomac River and setting his clothes on the riverbank, refusing to leave until the president answered all of her questions. President Richard Nixon wanted to be a rapper. In his later life, shortly before his passing, Richard Nixon was quoted saying, "I have often thought that if there had been a good rap group around in those days, I might have chosen a career in music instead of politics." Nixon also knew how to play the piano, famously playing Happy Birthday to Duke Ellington in the White House in 1969. Theodore Roosevelt could speak and understand German, Italian, French, and Latin. As a child, young Theodore visited England, France, the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, the Ottoman Empire, Egypt, and Greece, among many others. He visited these nations with his family not as a vacation, but rather as an educational trip to enlighten Theodore Roosevelt on the history of his heritage, along with the history of art, architecture, culture, and civilization. The trips he took with his family to these nations really boosted young Theodore's interest in history, an area he would love and stay fascinated with until his passing in 1919. Roosevelt would use and learn from history during his time in the executive office as well. Franklin Pierce had to talk down a mob who wanted to kill him. The former president was residing in his home in New Hampshire in mid-April 1865 when a mob of angry Americans showed up on his property. This was due to the reason that he had not raised an American flag the morning following the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. Pierce gathered his courage and stepped out to address the angry group, telling them that he shared their sorrow from the killing of President Lincoln and claimed that his extensive record of public service as general in the Mexican-American War and as President of the United States, coupled with his devotion to the country, should prove his patriotism more than a simple striped piece of cloth. After hearing the former president's speech, the crowd promptly dispersed without harming President Pierce or destroying any of his property. George W. Bush was a male cheerleader. W. was a pretty capable cheerleader, acting as head cheerleader at his high school during his senior year in 1964. Bush Jr. would also continue his cheerleading career during his time as an undergraduate student at Yale University. Bush is also known for being a big Texas guy, even though he was born in New Haven, Connecticut, and went to high school and college in Connecticut. The last president to be on a live battlefield under active fire was President Abraham Lincoln. On July 12, 1864, President Lincoln was at Fort Stevens in Washington, D.C., standing exposed on the fort's parapet, wearing his famous stovepipe hat, making himself an easy target. A Confederate sharpshooter fired and struck an Army surgeon standing directly next to President Lincoln in the leg. Lincoln was promptly pulled down to safety and did not make any more appearances in battle. Before Lincoln, President Madison actively directed troops and artillery fire during the Battle of Bladensburg in 1814, during the War of 1812. George H.W. Bush was shot down over the Pacific during the Second World War. On September 2, 1944, the 20-year-old torpedo bomber pilot George H.W. Bush was doing a mission with the goal of attacking a Japanese installation on Chichijima when his plane was suddenly shot down by anti-aircraft fire. Although 2 of his crewmates would die, Bush was able to parachute and land in the Pacific, although this was just half the battle. The Japanese would immediately send out boats to go and capture the downed pilot. Luckily for Bush, he was covered by strafing fire from U.S. planes who kept the boats off of him. Also, the water Bush landed in was infested with sharks. Bush would end up waiting for 4 hours on a raft with sharks in close proximity and Japanese soldiers attempting to capture him until he would eventually be rescued by the USS Finback submarine. President Ronald Reagan was a very effective lifeguard in his youth. The old Gipper worked a grand total of 7 summers as a lifeguard on the Rock River in Lowell Park, Illinois. Reagan would save a total of 77 people from drowning in his 7 summers as a lifeguard. It's a shame Reagan didn't try to save the victims of AIDS like that, though, at least until it was far too much of an issue. John Adams, the father of John Quincy Adams and the second president of the United States, defended the soldiers who were charged in the Boston Massacre. Adams, a future president and well-known patriot even at the time, insisted that the men must receive a free and fair trial for what happened on the evening of March 5, 1770. He refused to let a mob do what they wanted with these men. This resulted in none of the men being sentenced to death, 6 of the Redcoats being acquitted, and 2 being convicted on the lesser charge of manslaughter, rather than murder. Adams firmly believed in due process and fair trials, principles that are foundations of the United States judicial system. Thank you all for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. This was Todd from Healthy History, and always remember to stand up to tyranny. The future depends on you.